Let's turn back to the UK, though, because the government here has signalled that plans for a second runway at Gatwick are to be given the green light if environmental conditions are met. The Transport Secretary, Heidi Alexander, said that she was minded to approve the plans, but the deadline has been pushed back until the end of October. Let's bring in Paul Kelso, who's been at Gatwick all day for us. Paul, very good afternoon to you. Just talk us through what has gone on here. There was a real expectation even this morning that this was go, 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 and yet it's been somewhat grounded, at least temporarily.
Yes, it has. I mean, I think Gatwick thinks they're probably cleared to taxi towards the runway, not yet for takeoff. We were expecting this to be perhaps a bit more clear-cut. The Transport Secretary approving a plan that Gatwick could put forward. Dig behind this, it's a lot more complex. The planning inspectorate actually rejected Gatwick's plans. It said it would cause harm via greenhouse gas emissions, emissions more generally from public transport, noise pollution and the like. But in an unprecedented move, the planning inspectorate itself suggested some tweaks to Gatwick's plans, so commitments around how many people should arrive at the airport by public transport, how quickly it should mitigate the noise pollution in homes around the airport. This has effectively given Heidi Alexander, remember, a growth-focused Transport Secretary and a growth-focused government, a lifeline to say she approves a plan if Gatwick will agree to these mitigations. That is perhaps easier said than done, though, because a lot of this still remains to be negotiated. And Gatwick, for one, isn't sure it wants to be subject to whether the rail companies can get people here in the numbers it needs. It only wants to be responsible for the issues it controls. I spoke to Stewart Wingate, the chief executive, earlier. We can hear him. He said he welcomed the government's commitment to this development. It sounds like there's a lot of details still to be agreed.
We very much welcome the fact that today the government says they're minded to accept the development of the northern runway here at Gatwick, and we're certainly going to engage with the government in the months ahead to make sure that we get a final approval to bring these plans to fruition later in the year.
OK. The planning inspector, we learned this morning, recommended she reject your original plan for the runway. What can you do to change their mind and meet the conditions that appear to have been laid down today?
Well, we're at the stage now where we need a government decision to take these plans forward. Our investors are ready to get on with this investment. It's £2.2 billion of private money, creating £1 billion additional economic benefit to the UK economy and 14,000 jobs. So we're ready to do that. But what we must ensure in the months ahead is that we work with government and we find planning conditions for this development that offer sufficient protection to local communities, but also give us the confidence to go ahead with this investment. It's £2.2 billion, and we need to be certain that we can utilise the runway in the years ahead to justify that investment.
As I understand it, the particular areas of concern are noise mitigation and public transport, how people get here, increasing the number of people using public transport. Under those conditions, as you understand, is this an investable project?
Well, that's the conversation that's now going to take place over the coming months. We need to make sure that wherever those conditions settle with the government, that we have the confidence that we will ultimately be able to utilise the runway. It only makes sense to make that investment, create those jobs, generate the economic activity for the UK economy, if we can utilise the runway, and that's what we're going to engage with the government.
But you don't know the answer to that question today, whether it's investable yet.
Well, that's what lies ahead. We need to make sure that those planning conditions allow us, at the end of the day, to go ahead with this investment. It's private money, so we need to make sure that we can get a return on that investment, and the way that we do that is by being certain that we'll be able to utilise the runway.
Can you meet a legally binding commitment to public transport use of passengers coming to this airport?
So there's a range of conditions attached to the planning permission, and what we need to make sure is the public transport condition, as well as the other conditions, are conditions that allow us, when we make the decision to go ahead with the investment, to push the green light and make the £2.2 billion of investment. And that's what we're going to be engaging with the government on in the weeks and months ahead.
That sounds like a no. How can you reassure that more people will use public transport to get here?
So we already have an industry-leading participation of passengers getting to and from the airport by public transport. We've got a very strong track record of having passengers come to and from the airport by public transport. What we're prepared to do, and we've put forward to government, are concessions that says, for example, if we weren't to have 54% of passengers getting to and from the airport by public transport in the future, then we wouldn't take forward at that time any further building of multi-storey car parks. They're the sorts of concessions that we've put forward as part of the planning process. But where we stand today is a position that says we want to go ahead with the development, we want to invest £2.2 billion in the UK, we want to create these jobs at the airport and the region, 14,000 jobs, and we want to get the boost to the UK economy. But to go ahead with that investment, the planning conditions need to be such that we can be certain that we can make use of the runway.
Let's deal with noise briefly. It appears, again, it's noise mitigation, insulating people's homes. Planning inspector appears to want you to do that all up front. Sounds like you want to do it in stages. Where are you on that? Can you guarantee that people will be affected by the enormous disruption that would bring, that the noise will be kept out of their homes?
So we've put forward an industry-leading package of noise mitigation. We've put forward a noise contour, which basically says that in the late 2030s, even when the airport has grown, we will not impact any more people than the airport impacted in 2019.
Okay, and let's deal with people will be watching this and thinking we're expanding an airport, another airport, the day after the Climate Change Committee has said emissions from air travel are going to have to come down to less than 20% of what they are currently. How can you possibly encourage more travel without worsening air quality and climate quality?
So the Secretary of State has had to weigh up these decisions. She's weighed up all of these points in making the decision, and she's minded to give us approval to go ahead with this project. We'll be having all of these discussions with the government over the coming months, and what we look forward to is getting that final approval later in the year.
The timetable's shifted. If you get a yes, when will you have planes? Could you have planes using the new runway?
So we're ready to get on with this investment as soon as the government makes a decision. If we can get an early decision this year, we expect to see planes taken off from the northern runway around the turn of this decade.